Welcome to Wake Up with Nubian Tigers Talk. This episode is a continuation of the Nubian Tigresses discussion about the 2020 presidential election, featuring Princeton alumni from the class of 1975, Debbie Jordan, Ann Herring, Marcia Gonzales-Kimbrough, Theresa Brown, and Dr. Katrina Peters. I want to ask everyone, what did they think going in was going to be the main issue for people voting? COVID, the economy, social justice issues? I mean, did each of you guys have a sense going into that booth of certainly how you were going to vote? I mean, you each individually have your own reasons for voting and issues that are important to you. But what did you think the rest of America was going to do? Katrina?
Personally, I would have crawled over ground glass to vote to get rid of the current occupant in the White House. However, I understand that people pick and choose a lot of different issues, and whether consciously they may say, I'm voting for this person because of X, but unconsciously they're voting for that person because of Y, Z, X, and other numbers. So my concern is that the way how things have happened is that there were going to be more people who were going to be voting for Trump than I knew. I was just praying that there would be enough people who would be against or for the Biden-Harris ticket, and that those votes would be counted sufficiently. I did believe that they would win if it were fair, and I find it very interesting that the question has been, whether there was a fair election. If anything was unfair, it was on the other side. But I still, on another hand, find it fascinating how people could be for one issue and ignore everything else.
Well, Katrina, what's the issue that you think the Trump supporters were for?
I think those who were more honest with themselves, they were consciously for the MAGA issue, which is make America white again, or at least in charge. For those who were less able to face that, they found other parts of the platform that they liked, such as anti-abortion, pro-life. Pro-life, somehow people don't seem to think that equals anti-abortion. They have all kinds of other different ideas about it. There were people who tried to focus on the economy. But I believe that unless they dealt with those fundamental issues, which were not even dog whistles anymore, they were blatant, loud, explicit, and persistent. So I don't see how you could ignore those unless there was some other part of you that wanted to buy into that.
What about you, Ann?
That was a question I was asking myself, quite frankly. And the only thing I could come up with was that people were voting for Donald Trump because they want to make America white. They want a lily white nation. They will say, it's the economy. My 401k has done so well, blah, blah, blah. And I'm not a financial person at all, but I do understand that financial things go in cycles. You can have your ups and downs, whatever administration is in there. Yes, maybe a president can be like Trump, can be, lenient toward corporate America, giving them tax breaks and what have you. But it's really the corporate leaders, big business leaders that really set the trend for the economy. So I couldn't really buy that. And of course, like Katrina said, some people got into, he's pro-life and that's so great and wonderful. And then you got into the evangelical Christians, and I just kind of blew that. I couldn't even deal with that because there's no one less Christian than Donald Trump, in my opinion. But it basically, what it boiled down to me was, I just think it was white power. That's why they voted for him, because they want this, making America great again is making America white. And that's how I felt about it.
So Marcia, given the dynamics in your household,
Here we go.
what do you think are the reasons why people voted for Trump, or what were the issues you thought were controlling the election?
Well, I guess in my husband's family, it couldn't be Make America White because they're all Black. But I actually think it was a backlash. It was against, it's vote not Democratic, vote not a continuation of the Clintons, of the Obamas, of Hillary Clinton's, whatever. It was buying into, for that part of the family, and I think for a large segment of the Trump supporters, it was buying into the hysteria and the fear of, if we don't have Trump there, there's not going to be anyone to protect our democracy, and to, maintain law and order, to maintain integrity, to maintain whatever. And I understand that's all, in my mind, it's delusional. But I think the difficulty with this election and who was going to vote for who overall was that there was no one or two or three overwhelmingly cohesion creating issue. I think because the issues were all over the place, that made it that much more difficult and uncertain to predict what was going to happen, because it wasn't just, it wasn't just MAGA, it wasn't just COVID, it wasn't just the economy.
So even with 200, at that point, the election on November 3rd, there maybe were about almost 225,000 people dead from the virus. That didn't even have an influence on his vote, the mismanagement of this entire pandemic by Trump.
My father-in-law was a physician for 32 years, then went to law school, and it now practices workers' compensation as a workers' comp specialist. He believes the pandemic was not so much manufactured and fake, but that all of the criticism and the hysteria in their minds about the pandemic, that it's all overblown. It doesn't matter what we would have done. It would have taken its course, and herd immunity is really what we should be working on.
Oh, so the apple didn't fall far from the tree then.
So
you don't have to respond to that.
So here is someone who was licensed to practice in Illinois, Nevada, and California, and still maintains his medical licenses. And, I can't say that he's an idiot. I can say that probably his medical education is a little outdated. He wasn't an epidemiologist, but I can't say that he, was dumb and stupid. There are people who, in their own intellectual brains and in their own intellectual analysis, do not see COVID as a big issue.
It's interesting too, because California was hard hit in the beginning by COVID. And so it's always curious to me that people can look at those bodies being transported to the refrigerated trucks and not believe that that is something real. But, hey, some people still believe the earth is flat. Debbie, what did you think the issues were going to be?
I agree with what's been said already, that the bottom line comes down to the racial divide. The dichotomy between white voters and Black voters came down to either a backlash against the push for racial equality amongst whites and some Blacks, as Marcia was saying, and those Black and brown people who really are sick and tired of being sick and tired, you know, and I think that President Obama, and I haven't read his book yet, certainly, but even he insightfully says that his presidency sparked the backlash from these white, if not supremacists, insecure white people who are really worried about the fact that they see their place in society being diminished by all of these Black and brown people. Even though one would intellectually think that the COVID pandemic, the COVID crisis, this pandemic that we're in should have taken front stage in terms of people's motivations, I don't think that was the case. I think that the racial issue was really the motivating factor behind many, many people's vote. And in terms of Black people who voted for Trump, you know, I think maybe Katrina would agree with me. I think there's the issue of identification with the aggressor. You know, I don't know how else to explain what's going on unless they see, you know, just an economic advantage. But, you know, I think that belies the issue.
Okay, Theresa, what were you hearing down there in South Jersey? Pull us together on the end. What were people voting for down there?
You know, people weren't talking about, well, I haven't been out, so I haven't
true.
Really talked to people. I have to, it's been interesting because I have a number of acquaintances on Facebook who are registered Republicans, and they are white. A lot of them are poo-pooing our governor because of the actions he has taken in trying to curb the virus in this state, and look at him as a little dictator, I guess, and don't think his actions are necessary. So, but I think a lot of what I saw on Facebook is party loyalty, which I don't understand. And if you get past the group of people who are going to vote Republican regardless of anything, I would have to say the race issue was probably a factor. And a lot of people, especially with Trump's first election, just did not, for whatever reason, like Hillary. It didn't matter that she was well qualified and probably the best qualified, she was the best qualified candidate at the time. It didn't matter. They just didn't want to see Hillary in the White House. I've heard a lot of people talk about they're tired of business as usual in Washington. And having served as an elected official, you can't just go in someplace and think you're going to change things overnight. You have to learn the system. You have to know what the laws are, the regulations. And in this case, the Constitution is what guides this country. And we have a person who went into the White House who didn't care about the Constitution, who didn't care about the laws of this country. And I have to acknowledge that at least I know my mother the first time around voted for Trump. And she thought he would be able to get in there and be different, not let the Washington culture dictate his actions, but she resolved that he had just become a little dictator, that he was trying to be king and dictate to everybody what he wanted. So for those people who I know who turned around, it was the fact that this man did not know what he was doing, that his behavior, you know, she even said if he had stayed off of Twitter, he might have won re-election. Or if he had managed COVID, he might have won re-election. I just, like I said, I don't know how he won the first time around.
Theresa, I just want to ask quickly. I mean, the man bankrupted multiple institutions, casinos down in South Jersey, and people in Jersey still voted for this guy. I didn't know what to expect from him on the business level.
And my mother did indicate that her finances, her whatever 401, not 401k, her CDs or whatever were much better than they had been in the past. But it's more than just about money. It's about how we are viewed in the world. We cannot go around thinking we're the be all in this world anymore. Maybe way back in World War I and World War II we were, but we're not. And to have a leader that is so God, rude, obnoxious, stupid. When you talk to people from other countries or you visit other countries, and maybe that's part of the problem. A lot of people never leave this country. They have never been out of the United States. So they don't know how we're viewed in other countries or the importance that people put on their country's relationship with the United States. And when you start talking to people in other countries, they think we have lost our minds that we elected this fool for president. And we're concerned that we would elect him again. So it just, like I said, my acquaintances on Facebook have been very quiet since the election. Beforehand, they were, saying, Biden's a loser. Why do we don't need him? He's too old, blah, blah, just everything. But they've been very quiet since.
6 million votes later, right?
Yeah. And most of them would not agree that there is a race issue in this country. I don't know to what extent the George Floyd incident changed any minds, but most of them believe they get along with everyone, that there's no race issue. So that couldn't be why people were voting for Trump. The financial factor is, I think, the thing that I heard the most was that they felt they were financially better off, even though Trump can't seem to manage any businesses.
Or the U.S. economy, for that matter. Right? I mean, that's one of the interesting things about Wall Street and returns, right? The Wall Street returns don't depend on how well the American public is doing. So the fact that you can get a better return when there's 10 million Americans unemployed and 50,000 getting ready to face homelessness because they're going to lose their homes is just a remarkably self-absorbed way of analyzing what the economic situation is in the country.
And
so
let's not forget, sorry, Michelle, let's not forget, the Fed is also supporting everything,
Yes.
They are backstopping all of the issues that could really amount to a major catastrophe in this country were it not for their, for their dealings.
Exactly.
But, and I just really, I have a very difficult time with people who vote the party line, regardless of what it means to their interests. And I know that a lot of people, Republicans, went straight down the ballot and voted party lines. I never go straight down the ballot. A lot of people did that because he was a Republican. I'm a Republican. I've been a lifelong Republican. I've never voted for a Democrat. I'm doing Republican. And I know I do have some friends who are like that they will not vote for a Democrat. So
to me, that's amazing, particularly when you're talking about Black people, because here's a person who has said, oh, Black people die from COVID. Let's not do anything about it.
Well, I don't know any other Black Republicans down here. I think the ones that were are no longer Republicans. That's a topic for another day.
Yes, that's for another day. Another podcast.
I made it very well. My boss, who is also very active in the county Republican Party, we had talked about Trump, and his question was, how did we let this man get this far? And I said, I don't know how you guys let him get this far. He should have never gotten past stage one. but I'm not sure that he didn't vote for Trump. He realized there were some issues with him, but maybe he didn't. I don't know. Maybe he didn't vote at all. We haven't talked about the election, but like I said, most of my friends on Facebook have been very quiet about the election.
You know, it's interesting. People were saying, how did it get so far? But when did people step up to stop it?
And they did.
Right. And they didn't. And
Mhm.
every time Trump did something more and more outrageous during the 4 years, I would hear people say, okay, this time they'll stop it. But you know what? There wasn't no bottom. There is
No.
still no bottom.
No, it was a bottomless pit.
Perhaps he was right that he could literally kill somebody out in public on Fifth Avenue and nobody would do anything about it.
Yeah. And I think we all underestimated the power that his words had with a certain sector of this country. I mean, when you're able to tell everyone every single day that what the news that you listen to or the news that you read is fake, okay? He's saying that same thing every single day. And so there is, people believe that. So they wouldn't bother to pick up the New York Times. They wouldn't bother to look at the Washington Post online. I mean, none of the major publications, not even their local publications, did people trust. So they only trusted the stuff that came out of his mouth. And that's why we have 260,000 people dead and the numbers climbing.
But even our traditional good media, we'll throw the New York Times in there and the Washington Post and whoever else you think is in that good media category. I haven't read the New York Times, which I read every day of my life since I was in the 8th grade, since about 2017. Unless somebody tweets out a link to a specific story, I don't pick up the paper because I think mainstream media abdicated their responsibility to report during Trump's first candidacy.
Yeah.
Right. And if you know that someone is speaking something false, why are you repeating it on the front page of your media?
Hey, we can go back to the Iraq War, everybody. I mean, we can go back to 2003 with the Bush administration when they brought up all the excuses for the reason why we had to go into Iraq.
Right. So I don't know what has happened to mainstream media, but I feel like they have some responsibility to bear for Trump being able to be positioned the way he is.
So this concludes the second part of our post-election discussion on Wake Up with Nubian Tigers Talk, featuring our Nubian Tigresses Debbie Jordan, Ann Herring, Marcia Gonzales-Kimbrough, Theresa Brown, and Dr. Katrina Peters. Don't forget to tune in to the conclusion of our post-election recap as we all share our reactions to the final results of the 2020 presidential campaign.
If you enjoyed what you heard today, visit our website, NubianTigersPodcast.com. In addition to the podcast, we also post a resource page for each subject to provide additional sources of information. Follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @NubianTigers, written as one word. We are on YouTube on the Nubian Tigers podcast channel. And do you have a favorite podcast service? Well, we're probably on it. You can subscribe to our podcast on Anchor FM, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, Stitcher, and Breaker. Just look for Nubian Tigers Talk. Looking forward to sharing some knowledge with you next time.
Wake up, wake up, wake up.